Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by FreshBooks and Working Copy. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is a very special guest, Mr. Stephen Hackett. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's great to have you. I mean, I feel like we've seen a lot of each other this summer. I mean, a lot more than usual. Just last weekend, we were in Detroit where you were talking about podcasting, and we saw your 13 iMac G3s in a real museum.
Real life museum. So I did a little travel video. John, your arm makes a appearance somewhere.
I know. I was pretty happy about that.
Your arm is now YouTube famous.
Yeah, it was, yes, we went to the Maker Faire, and you spoke a couple times about podcasting. We took a look at your iMacs, and we got a behind-the-scenes tour of the collection at the Henry Ford Museum, which was really cool because we got to see an Apple One, a working Apple One.
Yeah, one of only like a dozen left in the world. That was a real special treat.
So people might be wondering what has become of Federico, and he's taking a little time off. He's also, if you listen to Connected, and I suspect there's a little bit of overlap between the Connected audience and App Stories, but he also had a bit of a meltdown with some of his podcasting gear. So not only is he taking a couple of weeks off, but he's taking an extra week off to deal with his audio interface for his podcasting setup. So Stephen was kind enough to agree to come on the show and help me co-host it. And we're going to talk today about menu bar apps on the Mac because...
Yes. Look, anytime I can invade one of Federico's media properties and talk about the Mac, like I'm down, like anytime. So
right.
I was happy to do this.
Right. You're already there with your monthly column on Mac Stories and in the newsletter here and there. And that's great. I mean, yes, talking to Federico about menu bar apps on the Mac is probably would be 90% me talking and at most 10% of him talking. So I thought we'd go through our menu bar apps and just talk a little bit about why we use them and why they're there. And this was a good exercise for me because I think you'll see from the notes for the show today, Stephen, that I actually uninstalled a few because it caused me to rethink a little bit what I'm doing because I have quite a few here, especially since I'm using Bartender, which I guess I'll mention first because Bartender's an app that basically gives you 2 layers of menu bar apps up in your menu bar. I have it set up so it displays 3 little dots like ellipses, and you click on that and it shows you the second tier of menu bar apps. And just kind of structurally, the way I do it is the ones that I actually need to use on a fairly frequent basis, I put in that top level. And the ones that I don't need but are handy to have because maybe it's a quick way to get to settings or something like that are in the secondary level. Do you use Bartender at all, Stephen?
I do on my laptop, but on my iMac, I don't have the need. I got a big 27-inch display, and I don't have quite as many as you do, even though I think I have probably way more than most. But I've got enough room on the iMac Pro, so I leave them all visible. But that app is absolutely lifesaver if you're using a notebook or a smaller display.
Right, especially if you're on like the 12 or 13-inch MacBooks, that it makes a big difference. And I've got a 13-inch that is my main computer here at my desk too. It's connected to a 27-inch display, but Bartender for when I'm on the go is a real lifesaver. I thought I would start with a menu bar app that we both use, which is iStat Menu, and we both use it a little differently. There's what's interesting to me about iStat Menu from Bojangles is that there's so many different little pieces of this. It's one of those apps though that's really easy to get carried away with because if you installed all the little pieces of iStat Menu, it would stretch all the way across your 27-inch screen. I think there is a ton of stuff there, and what I use it for, I've got 3 components installed. I've got the one that tells you what the temperature of the various components of your system are, one for memory usage, and one for the CPU. And that just gives me, I don't know, when things are getting sluggish or something, it's nice to be able to look up in the menu bar and think to myself, well, is there some app on my system that's running amok and eating up my CPU, or are my fans about to spin up in the middle of a podcast, something like that. I mean, it's just kind of cool to be able to see those. What do you use it for?
Yeah, so I have all of those. I have them all behind just one icon though. So I use the CPU sort of scrolling meter, and then if I click into that, then I can see memory, disk space, network access, and then temperature. Again, this is just on my iMac. My notebook is set up a little bit differently, but it was too complicated to talk about two computers. I'm relatively new to iStat menus. I had used it a long, long time ago. It's been around, I mean, forever.
Yeah, it has. It was originally a dashboard widget, I think.
I believe so. And I had sort of fallen out of using it. And then, really, when I picked up this iMac Pro, I reinstalled it because I really wanted to see all those cores light up when I do, multi-threaded actions. And I think this is maybe more useful on a notebook because temperature and stuff is like a bigger deal. But I like kind of seeing what's going on. I can always pop into Activity Monitor, but it's handy to have it all visible. So I have all that stuff sort of hidden behind one icon. Um, but I also use. I'm curious what you think about this. I also use iStat menus uh, clock. So I don't use the system clock built into macOS. I use the iStat menu one. It looks basically the same, but when you click on it, I have mine set up to show a calendar with the next 2 days worth of events. And then why I really use it is I have a world clock. So I have my local time, I have West Coast, East Coast, London, and Rome. People I work with live in the majority in those time zones. And so I can very quickly see, okay, yeah, what time is it for Mike or Federico before I call them or something. And it's something that's just it's handy. You could use Apple's thing and a third party. There are some menu bar apps that like put calendar items like Fantastical, put calendar items in your menu bar, or even put time zones. But this collapses it all into one sort of section, and I find that pretty handy.
Yeah, that seems like a really great idea. I had not thought to do that before because I am using Fantastical as a separate menu bar item so that I can both get a quick view of my upcoming events as well as just add things to the calendar very easily. But I could definitely see using what you're doing because there are a lot of other ways to get things into Fantastical, including Alfred, which is an app I use. I mean, it's pretty easy to use an Alfred integration to quickly add things to your calendar.
Yeah, and that's one thing that has over the iStat menu thing. I can't add things to the calendar here, but it does give you a shortcut to launch the calendar app pretty quickly. So
Hmm.
it works for me. And the last one I use, and I feel like it's probably the least used iStat menu widget, but I use the weather one. It's just real simple. I get the temperature and sort of this, status, sunny, cloudy, rainy up in my menu bar. That is an extra paid feature in iStat menu because they have to go hit a weather API. I don't get a radar, which I really like radars in my weather apps, but it's easy to see if I just need to pop in and say, hey, what is it going to be doing tomorrow? Just real quickly see it. And it's laid out really nicely. I used to use Carrot Weather. They have a menu bar app on the Mac, but
Hmm.
it's kind of buggy and clearly it's not the developer's focus, which is totally fair, totally fine.
Right.
So I switched over to this maybe like a month or two ago, and I've been pretty happy with it.
I used it for a while. I haven't been using it recently, but I agree with you. The layout is really nice, and there's a lot of detail there when you click in and see. Want to get an idea of what's going to happen in the upcoming days. It's really nicely done.
Yeah,
What
it is.
what's that radar app that you use on iOS? I know you've got a one that you like a lot.
I used to use Storm by Weather Underground, but they've actually discontinued that app. So I'm just using Carrot Weather now, um, and it totally gets the job done.
Yeah, that's too bad. I know I tried Storm before, and that was a pretty nice app. I'm surprised they got rid of that.
Yeah, they sort of rolled it back into their main app, and we're really off topic now, but I feel like the main Weather Underground iOS app is really cluttered and busy, and like it's too much. Like there's too many levers and knobs, and
Yeah.
so Carrot Weather is the obvious choice if you're looking for a good iPhone weather app.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by FreshBooks. To all the freelancers out there, you know how important it is to make smart decisions about your business. Our friends at FreshBooks can save you up to 192 hours with their cloud accounting software for freelancers that's ridiculously easy to use. Here's how they do it: by simplifying tasks like invoicing, tracking expenses, and getting paid online, FreshBooks has dramatically reduced the time it takes for over 10 million people to deal with their paperwork. I want to talk a little bit about invoicing today. Yeah, I know it's a chore, but here's the thing. Invoicing is essential. You don't invoice, you don't get paid. You don't get paid, you don't have a business. As simple as that is, invoicing is still a chore. That's why you want to use FreshBooks. It takes the pain and guesswork out of invoicing. An invoice is super simple to set up and send to a client. But best of all, you can actually tell when the invoice has been seen. No more guessing at all. If time passes and your invoice hasn't been opened, maybe it's gotten lost in the shuffle and you should follow up. The other nice thing related to invoicing is that FreshBooks can do the following up for you. You send the invoice, and FreshBooks can send out automatic reminders if you don't get paid on time. It eliminates the need to set up reminders for yourself and set aside time to chase down late payments so you can get back to the work at hand. So, if you're listening to this and not using FreshBooks yet, now is the time to try it. FreshBooks is offering an unrestricted 30-day free trial for listeners of this show. No credit cards required. All you have to do is go to freshbooks.com/appstories and enter App Stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/appstories, then enter App Stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section so that they know you came from this show. We'll include a link in the show notes. Thanks so much to FreshBooks for supporting the show. All right. Well, my next menu bar app is for Blink, which actually has a macOS version of the app out as a beta right now, and I know you've been using that too.
Mm-hmm.
It remains to be seen, since Apple took apps out of the affiliate program, what's going to become of that app. But I've found it to be pretty handy to be able to just take a link that you find somewhere on the internet, and it works a little bit like the affiliate app, which some people might be familiar with, which is also a menu bar app. But in addition to being a menu bar app, it's a full-blown Mac app that does stuff. But jury's out on what I'm going to do with that app.
Yeah, it's in my menu bar too, and that's a big topic. But sorry, you're stuck with that. It's kind of a cruddy deal, but it is a really nice Mac app.
Well, I appreciate that. Another one that I have up in the menu bar, which I kind of thought I'd see in yours too, but I don't, is Rocket, which is just a really quick way to do emoji on the Mac, because it is not easy to, the character picker on the Mac is not the best way to find emoji. The search isn't good. And yes, you can put things in a favorite section, which I do, but I find doing a Slack style colon and then a name is a lot easier when you're typing, so you don't have to take your hands off the keyboard than using the character picker.
Yeah, this is an app that every time someone mentions it, I think I should go download that. And so I'm downloading it right now.
Yeah.
So I will go check that out.
Yeah, it's if you use Slack a lot, it comes very naturally. So
Yeah.
it's worth checking out.
My whole business is in Slack.
Yeah.
All day, every day.
I figured you spend a lot of time in there with Relay. So 1Password is another that I use.
Yep.
It's I'm curious what you think of the 1Password update, because one of the things that I find a little frustrating with 1Password once in a while is that you click on that icon in the menu bar and it opens a standalone window that you log into, and you can then really access all the stuff you have stored in 1Password. But it's really just for grabbing one thing. As soon as you click away from that window, it disappears. It's not like it's behind another window or anything. It's just gone, which I find, I don't know, to me it's a little jarring sometimes.
Yeah, I have a lot of complaints about the current version of 1Password, actually. That bugs me. It also bothers me that if the application is open and you go to fill it in Safari, you get the Safari like in-app pop-up and you get the application. They both come to the front. Like, why is it doing that? It doesn't need to do that. And I think the sidebar is confusing and frustrating. So anyways, I have some frustrations with 1Password at the moment. But yeah, it's one of those apps that like I can't use my computer or iOS devices without it. All my stuff is in there, and it's been in my menu bar for years and years.
Yeah, despite a few rough edges, it's one of the first things I install on the Mac, along with things like Dropbox, which is also in my menu bar. Just sits up there. And I did with Bartender, one of the things you can do is you can surface a menu bar icon when it's active. So I actually set Dropbox so that when it's syncing, it it shows up in the menu bar even though it's one level down, because it's just nice to know that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do when I'm doing something in Dropbox. It's not that distracting since it's a monochrome icon. It just kind of pops into view and gives me some reassurance, I guess, that Dropbox is alive and well.
Yeah, I mean almost everything on my computers is stored on Dropbox. I pay for like the professional account, so I have the ability, have folders appear in Finder, but all their contents are remote on Dropbox servers. And that was called Project Infinite. I don't know what they actually called it, but Project Infinite was like the code name. And again, like 1Password, Dropbox has to be first on a new system because all of my files are on Dropbox.
Right.
Anything for Relay that's not in Google Apps is in Dropbox. Anything on my system that's not in Photos, like I use iCloud Photo Library, but everything else is in Dropbox. It is the file system for me. And so I keep it there. It's really nice to pause things. If you get an invitation to a shared folder, which I deal a lot with, you can manage it there right from within the menu bar app. It's a very handy little utility.
Yeah, the one thing that I've got turned off on that menu bar app is you can have it give you notifications anytime anything syncs, which is a little bananas if you have any kind of automation or anything else set up. You'll just get these constant little things sliding in from the side, which I find incredibly distracting. I don't like Notification Center on the Mac at all, and I've slowly but surely eliminated almost everything from popping in there. There's still a few things. I'll let messages pop in there and Slack, but not much beyond that anymore.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, so another one that I have is Tweetbot, and this is the new Tweetbot.
Why, John? Why do you have Twitter?
I don't think I can turn it off.
You totally can turn it off. I don't have it on.
All right.
Yeah, in settings, show menu bar icon. Just go uncheck that. The icon is terrifying looking. All it does is let you compose. Get rid of that. You don't need
Yeah, well, it does a little more than that. It lets you go down, and it turns blue when you have some sort of notification. And you
don't need Twitter notifications, John.
I know I don't.
You don't need Twitter notifications.
I have them turned off on iOS, and I'm glad you've told me what to do with Tweetbot because I guess I hadn't really taken the time to
banish it.
Yeah, it dropped itself in there by default when I installed it, and
that's such a. I'm just gonna stop. That is such a terrible user experience when Mac apps do that. Like,
yeah,
menu bar apps are something that I really believe that pro users need and want, and most consumer users probably don't even like deal with them, right? Like, oh, I installed this thing and it's up there, like the tray in Windows. Like, you should not insert yourself in my menu bar unless I ask you to. Like, just don't do it. I need menu bar consent. Don't assume that I want that in my system. And Tweetbot has always done that. It's always driven me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, to me, in 90% of the cases, probably menu bar apps are extras of some sort, and it's definitely true with Tweetbot. There are some that maybe aren't, but I agree with you. I think that some sort of consent is something that should be given in order to get those up there. And the other thing that was driving me a little bananas about Tweetbot, when I did use it, if I got a mention or something that I wanted to look at, I would go down and select it, and it would take me to the mentions. But it doesn't select the mentions. It selects it in the side. It selects it in the sidebar, so it looks like you're in your mentions. But in reality, the view is showing you your timeline, whatever you were last in. So usually my timeline, right? So that's not super useful. And as a result, I am glad that I have gotten the advice to turn that off, and it is now officially off.
That's good. That makes me feel better for you.
All right. Why don't you go with one?
Yeah. So I'm gonna unpick one that I didn't see on your list, but I think is really helpful, and it's called Tooth Fairy. So maybe you've experienced this. I know I have, where like 90% of the time I use my AirPods with my iPhone, right? It's kind of their default device, if you will. And switching to an iPad with the AirPods is pretty quick. You can do it in Control Center. It works pretty seamlessly. But on the Mac, you have to go to the Bluetooth menu and then select it. And in my experience, at least, it's been pretty slow. And sometimes it just won't work, where I tell the Mac to connect to the AirPods and then they try and they refuse to. And so Tooth Fairy, I don't know what it's doing in the background. Maybe I don't want to know, but it basically forces that connection. basically you click the icon and your AirPods will be paired within a second or two. You don't have to deal with the Bluetooth menu. You don't have to deal with, oh, it was connected and then it dropped it again. It works every time. And it's a one of those little apps, kind of a great menu bar app that does like one thing but does it really well. And I've enjoyed having it there. It's the newest addition to my menu bar just a couple of weeks ago. But I have the couple times a week where I need to do a phone call or something in Slack or on Skype, and I don't want to turn on all my podcasting equipment. I just want to use my AirPods. It's a real helpful utility.
Yeah, the only reason I don't have that app is because earlier this year I sent my AirPods through the laundry. And
oh no!
Yes, and they, believe it or not, they actually did work after I was finished drying them out. But the case doesn't really hold a charge, so I can put the AirPods in the case. I can connect it to a lightning cable, and the earbuds will actually charge up, but the case won't. So they don't sound so great after that either. So
sure,
they don't last very long anymore. So I'm holding out and waiting for hopefully some sort of new AirPods coming this fall. I think that app Tooth Fairy just changed hands recently and is now one of Michael Tsai's.
Yes.
Let's see. I'm going to mention next Copied, because Copied is one of the best clipboard managers on iOS and has done a much better job than most of the others that are available on the Mac. And I go through spells of using this app and not using this app. I actually have had really good luck with Handoff, for instance. So if I do some crazy stuff on Friday mornings when I'm putting together the Club Mac Stories newsletter, where half the time I'm in MailChimp on a Mac because MailChimp refuses to work in mobile Safari. and half the time I'm on my phone or my iPad running some workflows to, for instance, upload icons of all the apps that were covered or something along those lines. And another thing, one of the other workflows is we do a list of all the week's stories on Mac Stories that we have in a section of the newsletter. And that one, I need to copy the markdown, convert it into HTML, and get it into MailChimp. And usually I just end up using the handoff feature because it works pretty well. I copy from Pythonista on my phone, and there it is, ready to go, and paste into Ulysses or wherever on my Mac. But other times, especially when I have like a chunk of text that I need to send out to a lot of different people over the course of a week, I will store it in Copied and just have Copied kind of floating on top of everything to the side, and then paste that into whatever I need to paste it into, whether it's an email or whatever. So Copied, it works really well. And I think you can sync up to, it's either 500 or 1,000 of your last clipboard items. So that can be a pretty handy way to find all those items between the Mac and iOS.
Yeah, I don't really use anything. I don't work back and forth between iOS and the Mac the way that some of you guys do. I do use Alfred, and Alfred has a feature that is a clipboard manager. And so I use that. Sometimes I'll paste 3 or 4 things and then go to a website or something and copy them back out. So I do have a clipboard manager, but it's not cross-platform.
All right. So what else do you have up there sitting in your menu bar?
I mentioned Alfred, so I guess I can dive into that a little bit. Alfred is a great tool. It does a whole bunch of things. You can have, of course, it just replaces Spotlight, but then you can set up custom searches. So you can have it search your bookmarks. You can have it search your website. I have one that searches the Apple support website. All these little kind of workflows you can build. And then, of course, it has things like I just mentioned, like the clipboard history. You can do snippets. You can control iTunes. It really is a really full-featured app launcher for the Mac, and you can run it with the mini bar icon on or off. I have it on for a while. I was having trouble sometimes, and I would need to kind of get at the preferences without launching the app. Like, kind of an easy way to do some stuff, but you can totally run it without the menu bar app, and I may go back to that. But Alfred is one of those things that my computer just feels broken without it. Like, Spotlight is good, but Alfred is just way, way better.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way with Alfred, and I have toyed with it's. I've had it in my menu bar for a long time, and I've toyed with the idea of removing it. But it is one of those things that every now and then it's handy just to be able to get into the settings really quickly, and that's why I keep it behind Bartender.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to Working Copy for sponsoring App Stories this week. Working Copy is a powerful Git client for iOS. This is also one of those apps that answers the question of whether you can get work done on iOS with a resounding yes. This is not Git Lite. This is the real deal. First of all, Working Copy supports cloning repositories from GitHub, Bitbucket, and your personal Git servers. That means your projects are available on your iOS devices wherever you go. You can commit, push, pull, as well as create, merge, and rebase branches, all within Working Copy. Working Copy also has rich integrations with your favorite editing and programming apps through the Files app, ShareSheet, and Xcallback URLs. That makes it incredibly easy to open your project in another app and make changes in line. When you need to test something off device, the SSH upload feature can upload changes to your web server as you edit, which is an incredibly useful option. If you're missing some parts of your toolchain on iOS, you can use the SSH command feature to run terminal commands on files inside Working Copy and bring back results from a remote server. This could be a cloud server, a Raspberry Pi, or even your Mac at home if you've enabled remote login. It really is super powerful. It's so versatile, in fact, that we use Working Copy's versioning to track drafts that we pass around among the Mac Stories team members for editing. It's a great solution for us, but it only uses a small fraction of Working Copy's power. Where it really shines is in the hands of a developer. It's time to get going and try Working Copy today. We'll put a link in the show notes so you can check out Working Copy. Use that link so they know you came from App Stories. Thanks again to Working Copy for supporting the show. All right, so what else do you have up there in the menu bar, Stephen?
So I mentioned Hazel a little bit. You know, it's a utility that basically it does actions based on files. So one thing I have is it looks at screenshots on the desktop, copies them to Dropbox. I used to use Hazel for a lot more. I think that's the only rule I have running right now. So it's not in as much use as it once was. But I see on your list Hazel's also there, but that you've removed it. Have you grown past it as well?
Well, I still use Hazel, but I was questioning whether I really needed it in the menu bar. The menu bar app for Hazel lets you fire off the rules that you set up. But most of those for me, I don't have that many either, but they're all automatic. So there wasn't really a good reason to keep it in there. And I don't find myself going in and setting up new rules very often. So I just, go into the system preferences when I need to use Hazel now.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Another one I've got that I think maybe a little more unusual is called High Sierra Media Key Enabler.
Yeah, what is that?
Not the best name. So in High Sierra, Apple changed the way that the media keys on the keyboard, so like F7, F8, and F9, how they work. It used to be that those were always tied to iTunes. But in High Sierra, apps like Messages or Safari can grab control of those keys. And so you go to hit play, and instead of playing in iTunes, it's playing the QuickTime file someone sent you an iMessage, if that's in the foreground. And there doesn't seem to be any real rhyme or reason to what apps grab these keys when. And I found it very frustrating. It's different on the MacBook Pro with Touch Bar. The Touch Bar seems wired into whatever like a media app is playing at the time, so iTunes or Spotify or something.
Right.
But the hardware media keys, like on my external keyboard, all of a sudden they just weren't doing what I expected them to do. And so this is a little app, sits in the menu bar. It watches those keys. Again, it may be better not knowing what this is actually doing. And then sends those events to iTunes or Spotify, you can choose, no matter what. Now, this comes with some trade-offs. This app does some weird things, like you have to enable some things in system preferences and security to let it work. I don't know how kosher it is in doing what it's doing, but I haven't had any problems out of it. But just be aware that it is a little unusual. but it watches those keys and makes sure that iTunes is always the app to receive those, not other things.
Yeah, I have actually used that in the past. I'm not using it right now, but it is strange because you'll forget what was the last thing you were using, and you'll end up with a YouTube video playing in Safari or something like that when all you were trying to do was start your music.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to mention, I guess, another menu bar app that goes along in a way with iTunes, which is iMazing. And iMazing is an app that does backups first and foremost of your iOS devices, and it can do those both over a wire or they can do it over Wi-Fi. And sometimes it loses the connection over Wi-Fi, and you have to kind of plug it in to remind the app what's going on. But having it up in the menu bar is kind of nice because you can give it a quick click and see when was the last time you backed up. And there's some advantages to the backups that you get with iMazing because they are incremental. You can roll back not just to your last backup, but to any of the other ones that you've got stored on your system. This is a really powerful app that digs really very deeply into the iOS system because I've done things like if there's an app that doesn't migrate data from one copy to another, if you're setting up an iPhone as new, for instance, you can actually take your old iPhone, dig around in the file system, find the data file, copy it out to your Mac's desktop, and then insert it into your new phone and bring that data along manually yourself. I haven't done that a lot, but it works like a charm. So that's why I have that up in the menu bar.
I've come across this. It seems like one of those tools, like if you need that, it is the tool to have. I don't know if I've ever had that specific need, but that's it's one of those apps that seems really clever in how it's doing what it's doing.
Yep.
My last one, I've got a few others, but the one I want to mention before we wrap up is Quitter. It's written by Marco Arment, and a couple of Mac apps do this. They've come and gone over the years, but Quitter basically lets you hide or quit any application on the Mac after a certain amount of time. So I don't have it quit anything, but I have it hide. I'm opening my rules here. 1Password, calendar, mail, messages, Slack, or Tweetbot after 5 minutes of inactivity. So I like this because as I work and I'm not in Tweetbot or Slack, they sort of hide themselves after a few minutes, so I don't see them scrolling in the background. And things like calendar and 1Password, I don't necessarily need all the time open, and it just quietly gets rid of them after that timer finishes up. So you can select an app, you can say hide or quit, and you can say how many minutes of inactivity should go by before the action is performed. And it's one of those things that just helps kind of keep the Mac neat and tidy throughout the workday.
That's a great idea. I have used Quitter in the past, but I haven't used it recently. I might go back and try that again because I do find the same thing. I find myself with a bunch of different apps open, spread over a few different spaces, and pretty soon it just becomes a cluttered mess and also a distraction from whatever you're trying to get done. So having them hide away is a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, I think that's probably a pretty good place to stop. I know that recently when Mike was on his honeymoon and you guys were doing Connected, that Federico, he suggested that people send Mike flower emojis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he deserves a little bit of that love himself. But I don't think we should send Federico flowers. What I was thinking we should do is, because Federico's on vacation and he's traveling around to various places, I think that listeners ought to send Federico a tweet with their favorite transportation emoji. There are a whole bunch of transportation emojis. And I think that and maybe, I don't know, describe your favorite snack. Because he's going to be sitting on beaches, I think, just sipping a cold drink. And I think it would be nice if he knew how people like to travel around the world and what they like to eat while they're doing that. What do you think?
I think that's great.
All right.
I'm in full favor of this plan.
You endorse this?
I do.
All right. Well, thanks a lot to everybody for listening today. And thanks so much, Stephen, for joining me on App Stories today. I want to thank our sponsors again, FreshBooks and Working Copy, for making this episode possible. And we'll be back with another special guest next week. But first of all, I want to ask Stephen, where can people find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter as ISMH. I host a bunch of shows over on Relay FM, including Connected with Federico, a bunch of other shows there. And then I write 512pixels.net, and I've been writing there for 10 years, talking about mostly Mac stuff these days, but you can check that out. And yeah, I'm around. You can find me.
All right, great. And as always, you can find me over at macstories.net and on Twitter, where I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you later, Stephen.
Adios.